So, firstly, thank you very much for coming. We're going to be talking about an anatomy of a risk assessment. What I realised when I first put the presentation forward, I called it the anatomy of a risk assessment. I felt that was a little bit precocious. This isn't the only one, right? So this is a purely personal view and an anatomy of our risk assessment. What are we going to be talking about? Well, you'll all be very pleased to hear I've got a variety of organs and body parts that we're going to be discussing throughout this. So those of you of a more sensitive nature, you may wish to move to the back or closer to the toilets. I'm letting you read these. Please, if anybody concerned, just say. First off, the cadaver. So, this is my attempt at sort of trying to create an analogy between an anatomy or the cadaver itself and the risk assessment. Now, like many of you on the speaking circuit, you often start with the title of a risk assessment and then work backwards from there, trying to squeeze the facts in where they might go. Okay? And to misquote Douglas Adams, that's why I love analogies, because I love the sharp pinging noise they make when you really stretch them. So, halfway through here, you may find one or two that are a little bit tenuous, but that's part of the fun of doing it. So the other thing about this, the other introduction I want to say is this is not a heavily technical presentation. I am not going to talk about checklists. I'm not going to talk about compliance standards or the 10 things you must check when you assess a cloud infrastructure with vendor A, B, and C. You can all go out and buy books for that sort of thing. This is a summary of experiences and observations and things that some of you, I hope, or all of you, I hope, will take at least one thing away, which will help you in your assessments moving forwards. So, a quick question here: who in the audience carries out assessments or audits on a day-to-day basis as part of their daily work? Hands up. So, not many actually. So, about 4 or 5 of you. Who here has assessments carried out on them as part of their day-to-day work, of risk assessments or any kind? Okay, what are the rest of you doing here? Okay, so slightly more, probably about 8 or so people. And does anybody here work in multiple geographies? Yeah, and we all know that there are huge numbers of differences between multiple geographies. We're going to be touching on some of that as well. And the other thing as well, what is the difference between an assessment and an audit? Well, in a nutshell, we all know an audit is something against a fixed standard, and assessment is, a finger in the air, effectively, and try and make it as objective as possible, and it's not always possible. I will be using the term interchangeably, because actually very often our clients, whoever they may be, our internal people or our external paid-for clients, don't always acknowledge the difference between the two. I like the term risk assessment. It's slightly softer. People feel a little bit more relaxed. As soon as you say audit, people seem to sort of tense up a little. So, and if I do use it interchangeably, please take that into account. Let's start at the bottom. Not that bottom, the other bottom, which is at the feet. So the feet is, they are the foundation of us. They allow us to stand, to walk, and to run. And I think understanding the foundation of your risk assessment in the first place is important. Understand why you are doing the risk assessment in the first place, because that is going to allow you to pitch the tone of how you assess accordingly. Otherwise you may be uncovering the wrong skeletons in the cupboard, if you see what I mean. You're going at it from the wrong direction. So my background is from a security perspective. I look, when I'm doing a risk assessment or I'm doing an audit, I look at it from a security risk perspective. Does anybody have any other perspectives here? Shout some out. Political. Perfect. Political. Reputational. Regulatory.
Business continuity.
Business continuity. Financial is one. Anybody here doing some financial risk assessments? No? Yes? Okay. Silent man at the back. So yeah, we have a variety of reasons why we do risk assessments. So my stance is security, but I know I have many colleagues in Boston, where my office headquarters is, very much focused on Sarbanes-Oxley or SOX. Is anybody not particularly aware of what Sarbanes-Oxley is? Brilliant. We've got a very, very well educated audience here. So, Sarbanes-Oxley auditors will look at things potentially from a financial perspective, or the impact to the business as a whole. So when they carry out a risk assessment, they will be looking at a certain different set of risks than I will do. Now there is a crossover in certain cases, and it's dependent upon where their narratives lead them. They may well cover background checks as well as we cover background checks. But ostensibly they look at things from a different way. So I often reach out to teams and say, I need to assess something here, I need to look at your background checks. Oh, we had that done just last year, what's going on here? So it's important to understand within your organisation where you are coming from on this. So Sarbanes-Oxley, for instance, they'll look at an internal group and they'll say there's a problem with the approvals chain on your internal PO system within Oracle. You need to fix it. To me, that's kind of anathema. That's another process that's owned by someone else. I'm more concerned by the fact that the door to their office is wide open all the time and people can just wander in and out. They're both risk assessments of some kind, but we are looking at it from a different perspective. You could even look at it from the perspective of a client in a project scenario and you as the vendor in a scenario. A client is going to have unlimited liability as a vendor, so they don't really, they're not overly fussed about some of the things you're doing. As a vendor, you don't want to be hit with unlimited liability, so therefore you look at this through a different set of lenses. Then what kind of tools are you going to use? And this is where Google is your friend, or isaka.org is your friend. Octave is one, Risk IT. Personally, I like ISO because it's simple, like me. And I think because of that, it's easy for me to impart onto other people how the thing works. When you're measuring risks, what else do you measure? Or sorry, how do you measure? Again, I like ISO, the 27005 risk measurement standard. It's very easy to put across to people the asset value, the likelihood, the impact of a risk. It makes sense. It comes out to the number. People like numbers. Where am I? Am I 3 or am I an 8? That's quite important to them. There's another one, the goal-oriented dependency modelling that's coming out. I think it's been around for decades. It's just starting to get in vogue at the moment. It's something I'm looking to. I don't know if anybody here has come across that kind of risk measurement approach. I think it's going to be making some big steps over the coming few years. It's something that we should be looking out for. The brain. So the brain is all about the planning. Okay, use your brain. Think about what it is that you're going to do. Plan the assessment. This is kind of the obvious stuff, but sometimes the obvious things need to be stated. So when you're doing an assessment, give notice. Not too much, but give notice. You can get away with less notice if it's an internal group, someone within your company. You're not going to get away with 2 hours notice. You might get away with 2 weeks notice or 2 days notice, depending upon your organisation. If it's external, you're certainly not going to get away with 2 days notice. We're here to do an ISO audit, let's do it now. That's just not going to work. So again, schedule it accordingly. The other question we see a lot, certainly from internal teams, is, well, that's fine, yeah, you can come and see us in a week, but let me know what you want to see and we'll make sure it's all ready for you. Well, that's not really the point of an assessment. I'm here to sort of tell you what I want to look at. But in part, look at this as an educational process. People are asking that questions because they don't understand what it is you're doing in the first place. So use that as an opportunity to educate them about, well, this is what we're trying to do, this is why it's important, these are the outcomes, this is why you've been selected even. And use it, as I say, as an educational and awareness opportunity. Look at the players involved. For instance, if it's internal, look them up on the global directory. Find out, is it a director or an associate that's running this particular program. That shows what kind of importance potentially the company is placing things. Or the range of people. Who should you be looking out for? There's one director and lots of junior people. Well, stop. Don't just listen to the answers from the director. Concentrate on those other people as well. And if it's external, well, LinkedIn is great for a start, right? As is Google. You can even find things out about companies. We all right there? Anybody's bag at the back? So anyway, so you can look at LinkedIn, look at Google. You'll find out things about your company, even things about the assessment itself, which we'll come on to later. If you're on the other side of the table, always plan a long lunch for an audit. A long lunch, about a 15-minute drive away as well. Let's use up those hours, okay, as much as possible. It's a trick that everybody uses, and it's a trick that every auditor knows. So it's play the game when it comes to that. Produce your artifacts in advance, sign-in sheets and evidence record sheets, all that sort of stuff. Get it produced in advance, or use it as part of your assessment. Can I print something off? Yeah, sure. Give me your laptop and we'll plug it into our network. That tells you something immediately straight away. So decide which way you're going to play this. And finally, know what you're looking at. Is it heavily creative versus heavily technical? You're going to be looking at two entirely different sets of priorities within the project if you're talking about a creative marketing campaign versus a financial services, back-end system, for instance. Okay, the eyes. This is one of my favourite parts. It's all about observation. And this starts from the moment you get out of your car or your cab. The assessment doesn't start when you sit down and hand out your sign-in sheet. The assessment starts as you walk into the reception area. Where are the security guards? I do a lot of work in India and security guards are everywhere. Where are they? Are they interested in you? Are they directing you to the right place? That sort of thing. When they sign you in, are you being signed in properly? Are you being asked to declare any laptops and things like that? But again, very common in India, much less common over here. The other thing I do as well is, while you're waiting in reception, always ask if you can go to the toilet. Because who knows where that toilet is? A number of occasions, it's normally either behind a secure area, and yeah, sure, it's just through there, let me open the door for you. Or it's out of sight, and I've been to a site where sign into reception, can I use your toilet? Yes, it's right behind. Oh, that's good, it's within a secure area. Walk in, toilets are there, the door to the secure area there, propped open with a fire extinguisher. Wrong on so many levels. So take these opportunities, okay? Use every opportunity you have. When you're in the assessment, look at the people, study them, analyse them. We're going to look at body language slightly later on, but when you ask a question, who do they look at? Are these the nervous glances around the room as to who's going to answer a question, things like that? That's going to tell you something as well. Nobody's quite sure of the answer. That's an important aspect and will give you a point to lead into later on. And then when you leave, keep observing. Okay, so they leave you at the lift lobby and say, help yourself, off you go, in which case you just go down a floor and then say, I've just been to the toilet, can I come in please? And then you're into another floor. The audit hasn't ended, the audit hasn't ended, or the assessment hasn't ended until you walk out of that building. So the bottom line is never let the auditor out of your sight when you're on the other side of the table. I stood in 44-degree heat in India with an auditor waiting for his cab because I damn well wanted to see him off our property. Because there was no way he was going to come back in. Moving on, the ears. So if observation is important and number one, well, so are the ears actually, so is hearing. So listen to all of the statements that are given you throughout. Pick them apart in your mind. Repeat them back. There is no such thing as a stupid, sort of question or a thought in your head when it comes to it. They want to give you the bare minimum that they possibly can. And you want to get the absolute maximum that you possibly can. You need to work out what it is that they're telling you and how much more there is to be said. You can use your ears in another way as well. So counsellors, for instance, your relationship counsellors, that kind of career choice as well, they're taught to use silence as a way of getting more information. Silence is an incredibly powerful tool. Nature abhors a vacuum. Humans abhor a silence. They want to fill it. If there is a silence in the room, somebody wants to say something. So if you're not quite satisfied with an answer, just wait. Look them in the eye and wait. And very often you'll find that people will try and volunteer more information. You know, people feel it's rude to sort of say, that's it, done, next question. Tends not to happen. You have to have a certain type of person to make that happen, right? So use silence to your advantage, okay? Let them fill the gaps. The other thing as well is listen to the subtext of what they're trying to say. They've got lots of challenges themselves. You can turn a negative and hostile reception, as it were, or assessment into quite a positive one. If you listen to the subtext and understand, actually, they've got problems of their own. They're not just incompetent, which is why they haven't got this documentation or they haven't got this evidence, you know, or that door was swinging open. Listen to that subtext and talk to them about how you can help them. How this report is a lever, it's leverage to their bosses to get stuff done. You can turn around a number of very negative situations that way. The bottom line is as well, I heard there was a quote in a book I was reading a couple of weeks ago. You have twice as many ears as you do mouths. Really? So try and work in that kind of ratio. Try and listen twice as much as you actually talk, because you will get far more out of an assessment that way. So the mouth. So when you're not forcing an awkward silence on somebody, you really do need to talk to them. You need to engage with them. This is not, show me this, do this, bring me that. You're going to get exactly what you ask for. You know, again, as I mentioned before, ask the stupid questions. They are the experts in their field of what they're doing. You're not. You're an assessor. You're an auditor. Yeah? You're, to all intents and purposes, you're effectively a generalist, because what they're doing is getting really engaged in the minutiae of what their project is. Ask the stupid questions. Get them regurgitated back to them. So is this what you mean? Is this what you're trying to put across? Is this what you're trying to produce? In this way, try and prove you're not a box ticker. You're not somebody who's just asking a question. Do you have evidence? Yes. Thank you very much. Lovely. Try and engage with them. When you have a working lunch, and of course you will have insisted upon a working lunch and not the one that's 15 minutes away, discuss with them about their pain points. Discuss with them about their goals for the project or their goals of the team that they are representing. Even talk about hobbies, for goodness sake. Because if you're going to be a regular appearance, if you're going to regularly appear in their lives, you want to create that kind of bond of trust. You know, as human social animals, we want to trust and work with people at the end of the day. If you try and engage with them and you prove to them that you're not a box ticker, there are advantages to you coming in and doing a risk assessment, the next time you come along, hey, how you doing? How are the trains working out for you? Are they really good? Did you buy that new whistle? You know, just talk with them about it. They will trust you more. They will open up a little bit more. You know, these are, you know, it's a natural human thing. When you are talking and trying to ask questions to people, speak to everybody. Don't just speak to the noisiest mouth in the room. You know, like most video conference systems do. They always zoom in on the one who speaks the loudest and the most constantly. Don't be that person, because the person who is doing all of the talking is probably the one who's, one, got the most at stake, and two, has written all the documentation. All the other people are the ones who are supposed to actually be doing it, probably. And if they don't know the answers, then that's where your problem is going to start, or where their problems are going to start and your risks are going to start coming about. So address everybody, treat them all equally. You know, and also find out who is the techie, who is the coder, you know, who is the creative genius, because that will then colour the types of questions you give and allow you to bypass the mouthy git in the corner, so you can just talk to me about the technology behind this. You know, I need to understand in more detail. You know, maybe in my case, much of it may fly over my head, but I'm actually engaging with him. He's understanding that what he's doing is important, and his pain and his conflicts will come out as a result of that. Moving on to the nose. It's kind of an obvious one. This is one of the stronger analogies in here, right? So simply follow your nose. You know, if there is good documentation, good evidence, good answers, a good lunch, you know, chances are they've got everything lined up. They know what they're doing. They're They're walking the talk, as it were. There's poor documentation. If there's, everything else sucks, there's no evidence, and they brought in Subway for you, chances are they don't. And nothing's really that black and white, right? You have to try and find your spot in the middle somewhere. So you have to follow your nose. If something doesn't feel right, keep pushing, keep asking.
Body audit?
I'm sorry?
Body audit?
Body odour. Yeah, exactly. Well, when humans start to lie and get stressed, they start to sweat. That could be a fairly quick reaction. Who knows? But I'll have to try that next time. But you need to keep asking those questions, discussing, keep driving towards it. That evidence doesn't quite stack up. There's something not quite right. Follow your nose. I do recall in one assessment I was carrying out, it was an 8-hour assessment. I spent 3 hours on the very first question. About 2.5 hours through it, I was thinking, oh God, I think I've just shot myself in the foot here. I should have been a 20-minute conversation. At the end of the 3 hours, I was actually right. Thank goodness I was right. We found that actually there was an issue with these access control rights on this particular wiki when it came to people who were joining and leaving the group and all that sort of stuff. So it is worth it, but don't sacrifice time elsewhere in the assessment on something that really is taking a long, long time to get to. You're going to not uncover other risks as a result of this. So be aware of it. It's a balancing act at the end of the day. Lungs. This is where you're going to hear a sharp pinging noise, okay? This is stretching it a little, but I thought it was worth putting it in here. It's a good point to make, though. There's going to be times when it's such a frustrating experience. The people on the other side of the table, be it the assessor, the auditor, or even, you as the auditee, as it were, are just resolutely refusing to work with you and compromise with you. This is where you have to breathe and relax and calm down. You hear that noise again? You need to understand that sometimes these things happen. You bring out all the other tools in your arsenal to try and break this down, but it happens. People have so many different kinds of motivators behind actually turning up for the assessment, and some of that purely is the stick. So you will go in that room and you'll talk to the auditor. They're not going to want to work with you. Try and pace that day as much as you can, or the period that you have. Try and reset your expectations. Quite literally take that deep breath and reset how you're going to carry out the rest of that day. The other perspective to this is evidence can take time to be delivered. It can take half an hour if it's in another building over the road, right? It can take a long time. Be patient. But don't have your time wasted. If you're waiting 2 hours for some physical evidence and printed documents, chances are they're probably printing the damn things off. Yeah, so just be aware, you need to call a cut-off. You don't have this evidence, I'm calling it in the assessment as it stands. And of course, when we talk about taking time, you never enter into a long lunch, right? You never enter into a long outside lunch. So always avoid that one. So the hands, this is another one I like. It's all about getting your hands dirty. Get elbow deep in those documents. This is where especially if it's written documentation, this is where the evidence lies in its rawest form. If it's electronic documentation, it's kind of somewhat like slightly less exciting to flick through an electronic set of documentation. But this is where your bread and butter lies. We had an experience, for instance. We were checking the documentation on background checks of taxi drivers in India. Now, I don't know if anybody knows, most good Indian office or companies offer transport for all of their employees, in and out of work, from their home, or at least from a central location less than, I think it's half a kilometre from their house, in and out. It could range from 4 people in a cab to 50 people in a bus. It's a massive operation. So this one particular company, we were talking about 4,000 people being shipped in and shipped out day after day after day. And that's normally a standard start in the morning. and then they just trickle out in the afternoon within reason, right? So this is a big operation. The background checks on the taxi drivers was incredibly important. People leaving very late at night, lone females, for instance, it's just a nightmare when it comes to health and safety, as it were, or protection of your people. We insist they carry out background checks upon their taxi drivers. Okay, let's have a look at these background checks. Like a pile like this of big binders full of pieces of paper with photocopied photos on them, flicking through. God, I mean, thank goodness there was someone else there. Keep on going. What did we find? We found about 200 to 300 cab drivers were all signed off by the same chief of police. Now, normally these background checks are signed off at their local villages or so whatever. Turns out, hang on, his name rings a bell. This chief of police also owned one of the main cab companies which we employed. Slight conflict of interest, right? So you do need to get elbow deep in this stuff. Don't just flick through, oh, that's very good, oh, lovely, oh, nice photo, nice moustache. You can't do that. You have to get right in and look at those details. The other thing about the hands is go on a walkabout. One of the things I love about this is it just satisfies my desire to be perpetually nosy. Because if it's within the bailiwick of your risk assessment, you can walk anywhere you want and open any door you want and open any drawer you want. So normally I sit at an empty desk, that somebody hasn't used, rifle through the drawers, there's normally papers in there. A number of times, these are confidential. So it's confidential at the bottom. Why are these here? If the next person who comes along isn't approved to see those documents, well, he's got them in his drawer. What's that all about? This kind of stuff is very easily overlooked. If you just stand in the corner of office and look out, it's all serene and calm. When you actually sit down in the middle, it's a very different situation. Go up to people's desktops, look at them. Arrange in advance. I want to inspect computers. I want to look through. I want to check, antivirus versions. I want to check, the versions of the software that they're installed. And in some unfortunate cases, I want to check browser history and things like that because it still happens. Okay? And the other thing as well is laptops unlocked or desktops unlocked. No lock lead or anything like that. Get your camera out. If you get your camera out, you will get a scrum of people. What's going on? What's going on? What are you taking a photo for? It's for my report. They'll grab that person. You walk out half an hour later and every machine will have a laptop lock on it, and if it hasn't, it's been closed and put away. So get the camera out. Do the scare tactics because they know it's going to happen. Intestine. The gut, right? Go with your gut. This is a little bit like going with your nose, but with a subtle difference. When you go with your nose, there's something not quite right. There's a piece of evidence that doesn't stack up. When you go with your gut, it's nothing. It just doesn't feel right. Don't like the look of this. I'm going to look further. That's all it is. And there's nothing wrong with going with your gut, as many Hollywood police movies will tell you. It's a gut feeling after. So, there's no problems with that whatsoever. So, what you do, you keep asking questions. It's exactly the same concept, but trust the gut, especially as you get more and more experienced, right? There was another occasion, we had a client inside an office, and it was a secure environment, so you had to swipe your card to get in and sign, all that sort of stuff. And then they had another set of walls, dual-factor authentication, tab in, put the number in, walk in. Marvellous, tried my card, didn't work, no problems. And we have a look at the documentation procedures, say a card is issued and a number is issued, and blah, blah, blah. Brilliant, I'm watching these people and they're doing it, they're doing everything perfectly. It's too perfect. It's not right. So you hang around the front, saw somebody tab in, type his code. Okay, just, can you tell me, where'd you get the number from? Oh, it's written on the back of my card. So the people who are issuing the cards and the numbers were using the 4-digit HID card, the one that's pre-printed on the back of the card, as the PIN code card. So bang goes your two-factor, right? Something I have and something I know. It's now just both things I have. That came from nothing apart from the fact that it was just a little bit too slick. I can't believe this has worked first time. Classic example of a gut feeling. Again, don't take time away from your other investigations and from your other searching out. Don't spend too long on it. Chances are you may want to go one, maybe two levels and deep, as it were, into your investigation and leave it at that. Because the gut feeling is even less accurate than the nose feeling, as it were. I knew I'd get the rectum in here somewhere. So, in fact, somebody owes me £5 for that now. So, look out for bullshit, right? This is not people giving you over-specific, sentences or over-specific answers. Yes, we have tested that. When did we test it? 18 months ago. This is not that, right? This is pure lies, right? At the end of the day, it could be verbal. A yes versus a no. When the evidence says no and they're saying yes, we have. Well, someone's lying somewhere. Right? It could be falsified evidence. You can sometimes see this when signatures are done in slightly different pen and handwriting and stuff like that, especially when you're in a country that uses paper records more, right? This could be, approvals that can't be verified. Oh, here's a text document with all our approvals. Hang on a minute. It's a text document? I don't get it. It could be the documents, and you look at the, the modified dates and created dates, or when it's been checked in, if it's in a repository, and just not checking out, or not balancing out. And sometimes it happens. People have, again, as I said, people have different incentives to be in that room. They might be forced to be in it. They don't want to, fail the audit, fail the assessment, because potentially we haven't done our job better elsewhere to say we're here to help, right? But the perception is, I'm going to get fired if I don't pass this, so I'm damn well going to make sure I'm going to pass. Look out for when people are just lying. The other thing as well is body language, and I'm a little bit sort of cautious about talking about body language because it's such a a fairly a general science, as it were. But when people, if you're asking for an answer, if the person is right-handed, and this is like I say, what if they're ambidextrous? But if they're right-handed and they're looking up to their top right, so up here, as they're talking to you or getting getting the information, chances are they're creating that information. Yeah? If they're looking up to their top left, they're recollecting that information. That's one way of looking at this. The other thing is they'll change their body position. They'll turn slightly away from you. They'll protect you. They don't want to sort of stand here, ostensibly exposing themselves to you as they tell you a lie. They want to hide themselves. They'll be eager to follow a change of topic. Let's move on. Yes, let's. Because they think they've got away with it. And the other thing as well is it's quite common is, somebody who's telling a lie is very often on the defensive versus somebody who is not and is continually questioned is on the offensive. Because when you're on the defensive, you're trying to build the lie in your head at the same time as answering the questions. And no, that's not right. It's a completely different scenario. They're not perfect indicators. They're just another little tool in the arsenal to try and make sure, or to try and ascertain. Something's not feeling right. I've got a gut feeling. My God, my nose isn't right, and he's looking up to his top right, and I'm sure I saw him write with his right hand. Well, I think he's probably telling a lie, So put it together as part of everything else. So the final slide, the evisceration. Now, I read about this, I found out what the word evisceration was, so I used it in here. Evisceration is in a post-mortem when they pull all of your internal organs out in one go, from the tongue all the way through to the lower intestine. And it's called a pluck. And they can take it away. It's a fantastic term, they take it away, right? So I thought, that's not quite an accurate depiction of an evisceration, but I thought it kind of, it sounded good. We've got everything together. We've got our hands and our feet and our, and our gut and everything else all in one go. So, what are we going to do next? Is there a risk afterlife? And if anybody's looking for a title for the next presentation, I think that's a great one. Okay? Just fit the facts in afterwards. It seems to work so far. For me, there are three simple takeaways when it comes to risk assessments for all of us. And the first one is that audit's got to be collaborative. It's got to be open. It's got to be educational. It's got to be non-confrontational. It's got to be non-judgmental. And it's got to be constructive. It's got to work for both parties. If one party comes out of an assessment or an audit feeling aggrieved, it's not worked. Someone somewhere has not done the right kind of assessment. Okay? It's about continual improvement. It's about making sure that you are teaching them as much as they are teaching you. The other thing as well is, all of these things that we discussed, consider them tools as an actor. Learn to play your part in the play of a risk assessment, okay? Because the more confident you are in how you're carrying out your activities within the assessment, the more you can actually concentrate on the other people and give them that education and give them, the non-judgmental, approach to this. If they come out of it feeling like they have learnt something, they will welcome you with, maybe not open arms, but they will welcome you with, a Subway sandwich next time. So it's important that you understand where you are in this. And finally, the most important one for me is ask for feedback at the end of it. Ask for feedback, even as an assessor, as an auditee or an auditor. Ask for feedback. How else will you learn to do your job better elsewhere, right? So all the people who put their hands up as we do assessments, can you all put your hands up again? There's about 5 of you. How many of you ask for feedback at the end of your audits? We've got 2.
4.
Okay,
5.
fine. Well, not everybody, I think.
It's a risk assessment.
Not everybody, and I think it's a very important point to take away. So, on that point, this is the end. The bar is open. But I will ask anybody if they have feedback, please come and see me afterwards, either on the presentation, on me, or any part of this. Come and speak to me afterwards. Contact me at the email in the bottom right hand. We'll leave that up there for 10 minutes or so. Very happy to listen to your thoughts and comments, and thank you very much.